Welcome, everyone. This is a webinar hosted by Farm to Institution New England called Producer Perspectives, the New England Farm to Institution Market. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Caitlin Haskins. I'm the Communications Manager for FINE. And we'll be joined today by a couple of other FINE team members, as well as a few guest farmers who will be speaking to us about how our research relates to their work. Thank you for joining us today. We've got 33 people on the line currently and more than 100 people registered, so hopefully we'll be joined by some more throughout the webinar. So today, Peter will be giving a brief introduction to FINE and to our metrics project, followed by some survey highlights by Nessa Richman, our metrics coordinator. And then we'll hear from these three farmers, Sarah Redfield, Carole Soule, and Arend Tensin. At the end, you'll have a chance to ask us some questions. You can ask questions of FINE staff members or of the farmers who are talking to us today. And we'll wrap it up with a nice closing by Nessa. So there are a couple of options for you to interact with us throughout the webinar. There is the group functionality within Zoom, which you can find in your black Zoom toolbar. You are welcome to message the panelists directly or everyone on the webinar. There's also the Q&A function, as I mentioned before, where you can type in your question and then we'll answer them as appropriate at the end of the webinar. We're hoping to have 15 minutes at the end for questions, but we'll see how things go today. So our first speaker will be Peter Allison, who's the Network Director for FINE, followed by Nessa Richman, who, like I said earlier, is our Metrics Manager. Our three guest speakers for today are Sarah Redfield, who comes from Lakeside Family Farm in Maine, Carole Soule from Miles Smith Farm in New Hampshire, and Arend Tensin from Tensin Farms. You can find links to their websites here. So now I'm going to pass it over to Peter to walk us through some information about FINE and the metrics project.
Thanks, Caitlin, and hello, everyone. It's great to be with you here today. As Nessa mentioned, I'm the Network Director for Affirmed Institution New England, and really excited about our webinar today. So just a really brief introduction to FINE. We are focused on mobilizing the power of institutions in New England to transform our broader food system. We've been around for about 6 years and serve as a broad network connecting lots of different players around the region in terms of producers and businesses, agencies, nonprofits, funders, and other stakeholders. The reason we focus on institutions is that they have the opportunity to provide a diversified and stable market to the producers, land producers, seafood producers, beyond the direct market. And they serve a lot of people. About a quarter of the population in New England eat at institutions each year at some time or another. And those institutions buy a considerable amount of local food right now, and we believe they have the opportunity to buy considerably more. Compared to the direct market, they actually are buying a higher percentage of local food, which we'll talk about in a second. As meaningful is it, we've heard consistently that the trend is for them to be buying more and more local food over time. They have an opportunity, they have a commitment, they're getting pressure from a variety of different sources to do that. And we're seeing considerable change in traction in terms of the amount of local food that institutions are buying and their interest moving forward. And in addition to the number of people who learn at institutions, who study, who are cared for, there's a lot of people who are employed by institutions. In fact, it's the highest sector of employment outside of government in New England. So the opportunity for institutions to reach and feed and serve a lot of different people and to source a lot of food in the process of doing that is the principal reason that we focus on this sector. specifically, you can see the wide range of institutions that exist here in our region. 4,600 schools, 210 colleges, 256 hospitals. And equally impressive is that there's close to 35,000 farms in New England who are growing and raising a wide variety of products, small operators as well as larger operators. And making that connection between these farms and the institutions is what we're all about. As I mentioned earlier, the average food by institutions is around 16% based on our data and other research that's been done. By sector, the K through 12 schools are about 15%, colleges at 21%, and the healthcare sector is around 13%. So considerable and growing amount of local food purchasing. Really briefly, FIND's work focuses on a number of different areas. We do work across the sectors in terms of bringing people together, creating connections, introducing them, providing assistance, education, sharing information. And we also do targeted projects on specific barriers in the supply chain that we've identified along with our partners. Some of those projects include working with local processors who are getting food prepared for institutions in a format that's ready to serve and eat. Working to look at the contracts that manage the relationships between institutions, food service management companies, and their purveyors. Focusing a lot on the college and university sector, as well as supporting work with partners on the healthcare and K through 12 sector at this point. One of the areas that we've focused a lot of attention on in the last few years, and the focus of the webinar today, is our metrics work, designed to help us really better understand the system that we're trying to change, help us track the progress in making those efforts that partners and stakeholders are making around the region, and to inform our plans and strategies moving forward. The Metrics Project has been supported by some key funders, the Henry P. Kendall Foundation, John Merck Fund, as well as some other key supporters of ours, and has resulted in a number of research projects that we've done, and as I mentioned, pulling together information from other sources as well. The dashboard that you see here is sort of the quick glance of all the data that we're referring to. And you can see that there's sections for each sector, and you can click on each of those icons on this dashboard to get much more detail about the research that's been done, as well as the food production reports that we'll be talking about today, and a food distributor survey. And on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a lot of other information about the data sources, other resources, state profiles where we break the information out by specific, each of the 6 New England states to give a snapshot. And there's a tremendous opportunity to dive deeper into this data in terms of the survey tools as well as the results. And encourage you all to explore that at your leisure. One of the things you'll find in the dashboard, and that we're going to be getting to here today, is 3 of the research reports based on studies that we've conducted. The first, it was on distributors, the getting it there. The second was on the campus sector, Campus Dining 101. And the third one that we're going to be talking about today relates to producer perspectives on selling into the institutional market. And you can get copies of all these reports on the dashboard, and as I mentioned, the 6 state profiles as well. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Nessa Richman, who has been the manager of our metrics project from the inception, working with a team of consultants, an advisory group, and staff and partner organizations, and specifically to tell you about the most recently conducted report on producer perspectives. So without further ado, let me turn it over to you, Nessa. And once again, it's great to have you all here, and really interested in hearing the producer perspectives as well as your questions and answers at the end.
Thanks, Peter. And I'll say I'm going to be going through some survey highlights, and then I will be passing it over to our 3 farmers who've been kind enough to take time out of their busy schedules, busy especially at this time of year, to be with us today. So as Peter said, the Metrics project really has looked across the 3 types of institutional sectors that FINE focuses on: K through 12 schools, hospitals, and colleges and universities, and also across the supply chain. And we started work, really by looking at what available sources of secondary data were around, and then did this original research where we saw a gap. And one important gap was in producer perspectives, specifically around the farm to institution market. I do want to say before I move forward that, the statistics that Peter mentioned and everything that I'll be going over in the coming slides is from our survey sample. And the sample population, the farmers who responded to the survey are not necessarily representative of the full population of farms in New England. So that means that, results may vary, and also that, as with almost all surveys, these are a lot of the results are about people's perceptions, and those may be different over time. So I just want to state that at the outset. I might state it again in the course of presenting the data. So as I said, in order to fill this gap around information about producer perspectives on the farm to institution market, we set out in winter of 2016 to better understand the opportunities and challenges for producers in our farm to institution market. What I'm going over is very much a summary. You can dive in deeper by reading the full 30 or 35-page report that's available for download online. And again, if you want a brief glance, if you want to show a kind of a brief glance to any key stakeholders that you may be trying to communicate to, then the dashboard is a great place to go. It picks out the top 8 or 10 key indicators that we felt were the most important. So in our survey, we asked about a couple of different important categories of information. We asked for information about your farm operations and farmer demographics. We asked about the types of institutional markets that producers were selling to, the products they were selling into institutions, their perceptions of benefits and barriers in institutional markets, and their planned direction in terms of future growth of farm to institution sales. And before I provide further findings, I want to go over a little bit about our survey methods and procedures. So we developed this survey as a work team, consultants and staff together, and we also had a wonderful advisory team that we brought together of academics and practitioners who helped us to hone it. It was also pre-tested by 3 farmers. When we implemented it, we did it through SurveyMonkey, and it was a snowball sample, which really means that we worked through our network. We reached out to the state departments of agriculture, to cooperative extension, farm service agency, producer associations and organizations. We worked with Farm Bureau, distributors and food hubs, and others that work at the state level on farm to institution and local food systems projects. We offered 5 $100 incentive gift cards, and we ended up with a final number of full responses from 223 producers. Analysis was done by the metrics work team, consultants and staff, and then reviewed and honed by our metrics advisory team. And I do want to say that because we relied on snowball sampling, that means, again, that we're not really able to generalize to the whole universe of producers in our region. It's highly likely, in fact, given the results of the survey outlined in this presentation, that the producers that are currently selling to institutions or are interested in selling to institutions were more likely to complete the survey, which is not surprising. So as I said, 223 producers in total completed the survey. About 3/4 of those responded that they were either selling to institutions or interested in doing so. And specifically, 58 or 26% reported that they were selling products directly to institutions. And 45%, another 100 of them, said that they were interested in selling to institutions. Together, these farms had more than 15,000 acres in production in 2015. And we had a good range of farms, small, medium, and large. They're all represented in the findings. And you can see a chart that kind of goes over gross income and acreage in our report, but I'm not going to be going over that in too much detail on the webinar. So the information that I'm going to be providing now generally relates to direct sales to institutions. Then a little bit later, I'll go over information about sales to institutions via intermediaries like food hubs and food distributors. We had farmers from all 6 New England states respond to the survey. You can see the numbers here. And you can move on, Caitlin. Yeah. And one key finding that was surprising for us is that farms that sold food to institutions expanded. They increased their acreage in production by an average of 3 acres between 2012 and 2015, while farms that did not sell directly to institutions stayed the same size on average. So, and I will say that that was a statistically significant finding. In our report, you can see that we tell you what types of tests were done to indicate statistical significance, and I'll try to indicate that in the webinar for those of you who like to know that kind of stuff. Also, we found that farms that sell to institutions generally had higher gross sales than those that did not. You can see here that the blue bar indicates producers who are not selling directly to institutions, and the green bars relate to producers that are selling directly to institutions. So you can see here that the bars that we have highlighted for 50,000 to 100,000 and 100,000 to 250,000 were found to be much higher, statistically significant difference in terms of more producers who sell to institutions being in those categories than as compared to all other producers. We asked them what they sell to what they sell on average, and on average more than 50% of gross farm sales were fresh vegetables and fruit. However, fresh fruit made up a greater proportion of sales for farms selling to institutions than for other producers. You can see that here if you look in the dark green piece of the pie. 13% for all other producers, whereas we had 25% for producers who sold to institutions. We also asked producers what types of third-party food safety certifications were required. And the one that was used most regularly was GAP certification, followed by HACCP certification. And you can see the others as listed here. And we also asked them about other product certifications and label claims, with organic certification being by far the most frequently cited, followed by GMO-free, grass-fed, RBGH-free. So these are the other types of certifications that were cited and the percentages. We asked them how long they've been selling to institutions, and also if when they start selling to institutions that they tend to sell more over time. Farms that do sell direct to institutions reported an increase in direct sales to institutions over the last 3 years. They average in 2012 for our survey sample was about 16,000, and then in 2015 it was 34,000. The range in 2012, I think, topped out at 400,000, and the high end of the range in 2015 was actually 1 million. So a pretty big jump there in terms of range between the 2 years, 2012 and 2015. We asked farmers what % of their sales they make to different types of institutions. They were allowed to select, 1, 2, or all of the types. And the producers reported 49% said that they sold to K through 12 schools. 31% said that they sold to colleges and universities. 10% to hospitals, and 10% to other types of institutions. We have a list of the other types of institutions in the report. And again, although this is a pie chart, people were allowed to select more than one type of institution that they sold to. We asked what they were selling to institutions, and they were tomatoes topped the list, followed by apples. The meat category included, they were allowed to fill in what they were selling. It included whole chickens, pastured pork, ground beef, veal, rabbit, lamb, chicken pieces, and a variety of other types of meat. So it's all kind of categorized in there under meat, followed by carrots, potatoes, and on down the list. We asked about the way that they make agreements with institutions, whether or not they use marketing agreements. And 42% who sell directly to institutions say that they use informal pre-season arrangements with those institutions. And 16% said that they use formal pre-season arrangements with institutions. There may have been farmers who did both, and they were allowed to select both if that was the case. We also asked if they aggregate products from other producers in order to sell to institutions, and 15% said that they do that in order to have the volume necessary to meet institutional needs. We asked how interested they were in expanding direct sales to institutions over the next 5 years. And more than 3/4 of the producers who were already marketing direct to institution indicated at least some interest in each of the 4 different types of institutions. Producers seemed most interested in expanding in or initiating direct sales to colleges and universities. 64% were either moderately or very interested in this, and that was followed by interest in selling to public K-12 schools. And 5 producers also reported other institutions they were interested in selling directly to. Those included assisted living facilities, prisons, Head Start programs, and senior centers. So we asked about a variety of different barriers, and one piece that we really wanted to highlight here is where we asked whether producers feel like institutions provide a fair price. And we had a statistically significant difference between, in perception, between producers who currently sell directly to institutions and those who don't. 64% of farmers who currently sell to institutions agree that they pay a fair price, but only 32% of farms that don't currently sell to institutions agreed that institutions pay a fair price. So their perception when they're selling is that the price is less of a barrier, probably than they expected at first. Producers who already sell to institutions list these as the top 5 reasons that they sell to institutions. An additional market, building relationships with the community. They provide a stable price, they provide a fair price, and they provide large volume orders. And you can see the percentages related there. They don't see as much potential for institutional markets as being able to reduce their distribution costs or reduce their marketing costs, as an example. The next slide shows you what those reasons are for producers who don't yet sell to institutions but are interested in doing so. Additional market still topped the list, and building a relationship with the community still came in second, but the other 3 are different. They cited reduced distribution costs, large volume orders, and reduced marketing costs as reasons. So they're much less likely to feel that fair price would be a reason to sell to institutions, and that again is the largest discrepancy between the 2 groups. And these are some of the barriers, but just skip that one. That's an old version. What I want to do is show you, we asked about a number of different barriers in selling to institutions. And here we have the information on one slide because we thought it was really remarkable how much higher Producers that are interested in selling to institutions but not yet doing so would rate these barriers than the producers who currently sell directly to institutions. So you can see the blue bar shows you producers that are interested but not doing it yet, and the green bars show you the producers that are already doing it. And all those little stars next to, I think, all but one of these potential barriers we asked them to rate, there's a statistically significant difference between the two groups, everything except seasonality of products. I realize I'm going through information about reasons for selling to institutions and barriers in selling to institutions very quickly because we don't have too much time. But again, this information is presented in the report, and where you can peruse and spend some more time on those bar charts. Now I want to move on to providing a little bit of information about what we found about sales to institutions through intermediaries. So just to define, an intermediary is a wholesale buyer, such as a food distributor, a food hub, or a food auction. And the reason that we don't have as much information or as many responses is because many producers who sell to intermediaries don't always know where their food ultimately ends up. We were able to find that producers who sell directly to institutions are also more likely to sell their products to institutions via these intermediaries than producers who don't sell directly. So, even though a lot of the producers who sell to intermediaries, who in turn sell products to institutions, are unaware of it, we still wanted to provide information. You can see that the N is much smaller on this chart of the top 10 local food products sold to institutions through intermediaries. So there are some similarities. You can note that tomatoes still top the list. And I should note here, in both of these top products list, that it's by value of products sold to institutions. And you can see followed by salad mix, summer squash, apples and beets, and go on down the list. An open-ended question in the survey gauged what producers considered were the main benefits of selling through intermediaries. And delivery and distribution was top the list by far. They also felt it was easier, 21%. Price came in third with 13%. Access to another customer base, large orders, reduced or no need for marketing. And again, you can find ratings of many more different types of reasons in the report. So I'm going to move on now to a little, our findings in the report. We work to bring them to data-driven recommendations for several key audiences that we feel we want to get the word out to. And this includes farmers and producer service providers like extension agents, government officials, funders and nonprofits and institutions. And there's a lot of information about recommendations broken down by these 5 categories in the report, but in kind of distilling it, our top recommendation was really that all of these different key audiences need to work to create more opportunities for direct interaction between farmers and institutional food buyers. And the reason that we feel like that's so critical is because our survey results showed that there is a place for additional technical assistance and educational materials that are addressing the significant differences in the perception of barriers to success in institutional markets. And because one tried and tested way of breaking down these types of perceptions is by creating opportunity for increased direct interaction through facilitated events. And again, there's a whole suite of data-driven recommendations broken down by type of key audience in the report, and there's a link to the report right there. And now I am going to pass it over to our first farmer, Sarah, to start off a trio of farmer perspectives. And again, before we move on, I just want to thank our farmers so much for taking time out, especially during this busy time of year, to help us with with this webinar. After they move through their presentations, we will hopefully have some time for questions and answers, both about the fine and the survey and the farmers' experiences themselves. So Sarah, please take it away.
Okay. So before I start talking about what I'm supposed to talk about, I need some technical help so I can see how to advance my slides, guys. Meanwhile, I'll be talking till I see the right place to click.
Okay, Sarah, try now.
I don't see a place to click. Sorry.
You got it.
Oh, there it is. I got it. Well, no, you're clicking them, right?
No, you're controlling it. You're good.
Well,
just navigate to the arrows in the bottom left-hand corner.
Okay, I'm really sorry everyone to be doing this, but what I see in the bottom left-hand corner is a microphone and the start video. I don't see a place to click.
Sarah, I can do it for you if that's better.
Well, I guess you'll have to. All right, so I'm sorry everyone for the technical glitch. It's not that we didn't practice. I'm from Lakeside Family Farm in Newport, Maine, and part of the Maine Farmers Food Hub. I want to start by thanking Fine for hosting this event and thanking them also for the work that they're doing in Maine. So time is really short for this presentation. And I started out with a slide deck of 50 slides, which the Fine folks quickly told me was too much to tell you. And so the whole set of slides that I offered will be available through them, and I'm going to focus on just a few things here. So I start with some farm background. Lakeside Family Farm has a history. We're fourth generation farm, 12 years as Lakeside growing mixed vegetables in Newport. We also have a philosophy, and I think this is probably pretty significant to how we have managed to succeed over these past 12 years. It's summed up by more Maine food for more. It used to be Maine. Now we have a few outside of Maine accounts. People, and we're focused on the things you see on the slide. Local, perhaps most significant, reasonable and sustainable pricing, quality and safety, and in some cases, food access. Part more of the philosophy. We're a mid-sized farm. We're ag in the middle. Some of you are familiar with that. We try to deliver directly to keep more money on the farm. We do understand the multiplier and where our employees spend their paychecks. And these are all deliberate choices. We did not start small and scale up. We started at the size we are, mid-sized farm. One of the things I think most important about us is we are strongly committed to food safety protocols. And just in case you were wondering what that meant, here's a slide with some but not all of our certificates. And if you were wondering what we paid for our GAP certification, it's down in the right corner from a few years ago. We have a lot of partners. We formed informally a group of farmers. Now, 3 years ago, by accident, we became a food hub. We didn't know the cachet of the words food hub. We didn't invest in any infrastructure. We just invested in pooling our resources to have greater availability and greater distribution. And this year, we joined forces with Crown of Maine to do the distribution for us. So it's another exciting partnership. And significantly, more farmers are joining us. I think this is the way of our future. So in response to comparing ourselves with the Fine report, I would note that we do have diverse distribution channels. We market directly and through intermediaries. You see here the sort of short list of our distribution outlets. And you see, of course, Hannaford's We Love Local logo. So we agree with some of the perspectives in the fine report and not with others. And we itemized our position in relation to that report in the full slide deck, which you'll be able to get later. I'm going to just mention a few points here and then move along. Just to set the stage, we're larger than most of the farms in the fine report, though our sales to institutions are significantly smaller percent of our sales. We agree pretty much with the analysis on the barriers. We don't think the barriers are anywhere near as real as most people imagine them to be. And probably we think that is especially true for getting GAP kinds of certification, not as hard as people think it is. So in terms of our own institutions, our biggest institutional sales are to the University of Maine and Colby, largely based on really important personal relationships with Glenn Taylor at UMaine and with the former Colby Food Service Director, Joe Klaus. And I mention here that the change in management, the change in attitude from one food service provider to the next is really significant for a farmer and can have a significant impact. And so it's something folks need to keep in mind. So that's sort of the general background. I hope people will ask questions during the question period, and I invite everyone to be in touch with me personally and individually afterwards for more information on anything. And I'm going to move on to the section where Fine offered advice to both farmers and the government and nonprofits, and spend a little time on this because we didn't necessarily agree with all the advice. And here's sort of a summary slide about nonprofits, and we have other thoughts on producers and other entities. Basically, what we worry most about is that producer concerns and voices aren't really heard in the development of products like this report, even though it was directed to farmers, and the development of decisions about how investments are going to be made or purchasing decisions are going to be made. And we think there's a reason for that. Farmers are busy, and they're especially busy in July, like today, but they're busy and they're not, if they're on the ground, farmers trying to make a profit, they're not all that anxious to participate. Unless they can see the direct return to them. So I mention that because I think it's a critical loss. Could you go back one second, Caitlin? And the other thing is that we're concerned about some of the advice that's given to, particularly to young farmers, may not be, and this is a pun, of course, well-grounded, and they will be misled. There really isn't a market, for example, for $19 a pound spinach, but we've heard folks at meetings say that that's what they can get. So that's an example. Thanks, Caitlin, go on. So we love to be asked the question about what we think institutions could do for us. And frankly, nobody's ever asked us before. So I do want to spend a few minutes on talking about that. First thing is buy us a new truck. I hope you're all laughing. We're only kidding. Fix the labor shortage, still sort of kidding. Buy us a shiny machine to make baby carrots, still sort of kidding. Fix the land shortage. I think there is something that investors in particular can do not to be driving the land price up. So here's my real list. The first thing is understand local. Try to understand that there's a difference between local and what you can buy from other places. Maine carrots are different. We ran our own little campaign taste test to try to get people to understand that. They don't taste like what you buy in California or Jerusalem or Canada, nor in terms of pricing, nor are they subsidized the way those carrots are. Not California, but Canada and Jerusalem. So some things are priced closer to the Boston market. Look for those, buy them. And do understand that reliable increased sales will help farmers become more efficient. They can scale up equipment. Play straight, don't exaggerate your local market. That's a real killer to tell a farmer that you're going to provide a certain quantity and then not buy it. Ask questions if you need to. Be a reliable business partner. Don't enter a relationship and then after a year drop that farmer for reasons that that farmer couldn't have anticipated. keep the playing field level, be supportive of existing farmers who are trying to make a profit. For those of you who are investors in this, please be careful not to support ventures that are going to directly compete with farmers who are trying to make a living. And I'm getting to the end of my time, and so I offer just a few quick suggestions that I'm not going to go through all of them. But this is the big one: support, sustain local. Keep local in everyone's mind, wherever you are, for you, your institution, your neighbor, and we all win. And this is Lakeside Family Farm, and there is Lakeside's family.
Thank you. Carole, if you are ready, go right ahead and can start your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful first farmer presentation, and I just want to say ditto. Am I done now? My name is Carole Soule. I have a 36-acre farm in Loudon, New Hampshire. My husband and I also lease about 200 acres off the farm where we graze our 70-head herd of cattle, which includes Scottish Highlanders, as well as Angus and Hereford cattle. In addition to our small herd, I consider 70 to be fairly small. We aggregate from other farmers because not all farmers want to work with the public. We partner with them, we buy their livestock, and we sell their meat under our label, which is all USDA approved. So everything that you get from us has a USDA label and is certified by the USDA, which is our approval process. My husband and I, we're a little bit long in the tooth. I'm 65 and my husband's 60. But we do sell lamb, pork, beef, turkey, and we also, I wanted to tell you that our gross sales may not be quite where Sarah's are, but we gross about $400,000 a year. But even at that number, we barely break even. So we do sell to institutions, grocery stores, farmers markets, and we also sell from our solar-powered farm store. Just like Sarah, we don't receive federal subsidies, but I want to tell this group that Miles Smith Farm, as well as other farms that I know, are self-funded. So Sarah's a third-generation farm, and so they've had that farm in their family for years. My husband and I took our 401k savings, invested. We were in high-tech jobs. We invested that in the farm, and now I use my Social Security check, and we do whatever we can to make the farm work. But we have not yet drawn a salary from farm operations. So I don't need to really preach to the choir here, but we're not going to become millionaires doing what we're doing. In fact, I have a joke for everybody. How do you make $1 million farming? You start with 2 million. So I can hear the laughter, even though I hope there's laughter out there. So another thing we do is we have fun with our livestock partners. I've trained some of our Highlander cattle as oxen to pull things. We've trained a few Highlanders to ride. We have a porch pig named Tazzy D. Moo, and you can see her in the previous slide sitting on one of our riding cows. We consider these cattle and animals to be part of our ambassador herd, which we use to educate the public about animal welfare. In fact, they say it better than me. They're the motivational speakers. We got started in 2012 with a grant from Farmer Market Promotion Program, and since then we've been selling to 4 healthcare institutions and several other institutions as a result of creating marketing material and holding outreach events. About 20% of our sales are healthcare institutions. And because we aggregate, which helps other farmers, it will actually take very little time to spool up for greater demand. And I totally agree with the findings of this survey that we look for institutions to buy even more meat than they already buy. We'd love to make it more than 20%. We do have an institutional customer called Grapponi Center in Grapponi Conference Center in Concord, and they actually wanted 80 turkeys. So they gave us a third deposit, a third a third of the cost of the deposit of the cost of the birds. We bought birds, and the birds will be ready in September. So Chef Trish Taylor finds that our birds are bigger and meatier than most conventional turkeys, and so she uses all parts of the turkey, including making broth. Now this brings me to an important point that I'm not sure this survey made, and I'll repeat it later. This particular chef buys 80% of her food locally, and she makes it work within her budget. So I'm going to get to that. Keep that thought in mind. I'll get back to that in a minute. So as I said, we sell to hospitals. We sell to one hospital in Laconia called Lakes Region General Hospital. And in 2014, you know, I told you I'm a little bit long in the tooth. I needed my second hip. So this is my second hip. And I decided that just like you find a local restaurant that supplies local food, I was going to find a local hospital that serves local food. Right in my backyard, Lakes Region General Hospital buys beef from us. I found a great surgeon. I went to the hospital, got my hip replaced, and I ate the best food ever. And I'm not being biased about that. I would have had 3 burgers a day if I could have faced a burger in the morning. Anyway, hospitals are our best customers, schools not so much. And the reason we found is that the chef is the critical factor in finding local foods and putting local foods on the menu. If the chef doesn't know how to make local food, they fall back on the commodities and conventional distributors. That chef is a passport to local food. So one of the things I'd like to encourage everybody who has a stake in this, that can hire and makes these decisions, hire chefs that know how to work with local meat, that know how to cook, that meat doesn't come pre-cooked or in perfect portion sizes. The chef has to know how to cook either vegetables or meat when buying local and how to make the budget work. 2 school chefs were purchasing local food from us, local meat from us, keeping within their budget, serving delicious meals that the kids loved and the parents loved. But unfortunately, for some internal politics, those school districts let those 2 chefs go, and now the schools are back to serving commodity foods and pre-cooked meals. So I need to stress a little bit about institutions seeking out, hiring, supporting chefs that know how to make local food work. It's a skill not all chefs have. Find it, hire it, nurture it, keep those resources. And we found when we speak to a chef that can do this, budget is not an excuse. A skilled chef can make local work in your budget. So I'm finishing up now, but I do want to reach out one more time and say, invite us, invite our animals to present to your organization. We have, as you saw earlier, a pig called Tazzy. She's a 30-pound mini pig who lives in our house. She's been on TV, she's been on the radio, and she loved to share her story with you. She's not the pig you see on the screen now. That's Charlotte. She's 600 pounds. She'd be a little more difficult to get around. That's Tazzy right there. But I need to tell you about Tazzy. She'd love to talk to you because you know what she is? She's a hog for attention. So one other thing I'd like to mention is that when you do buy from us or from a local farm, celebrate that partnership. Invite the farm to the institution. Commit to continuing purchases. And as Sarah was saying, if there's a problem, talk to us. We can work it out. It's important for us to make it work. And one other point, and then I'm done. I wanted to talk about future farmers. You know, my husband and I are a little long in the tooth, and we are, I don't know, we thought we could retire, but I don't think we ever will. So what we're doing now is we're working with a 4-H group. You can see in this picture and in the next slide, the Future Farmers of America, FFA. We work with the young people to teach them how to work with animals, how to reach out, how to make a farm work. And that's important to us, to bring the youth along and develop that farmer resource that we all need. Now, I want to tell you that Sarah mentioned that she didn't want the new truck, but you know what? You can buy us a new truck, and we'll gladly accept it.
Thank you, Carole.
You're welcome.
I want to move us on to our third farmer perspective, Arend Tensin from New Hampshire.
Good morning. This is Arend speaking. We farm in Lyme, New Hampshire, a little bit different than Lakeside and Miles Smith farms. We are somewhat more commercial. We have a feedlot where we finish Angus steers. We put up our own feed. We also have a cow calf, but we bring in a lot of cattle to get the volume that we need for our operation. You'll see various pictures on your screen. That's my son, 16-year-old son, driving the large tractor on the right, and he wants to farm. And kind of picking up what Caitlin just said about the future, that motivates us to develop this. My wife, Paul, and I run the farm. We have two fantastic guys that help us. We're very fortunate. We have two full-time families that work on the farm, and we also sell corn commercially. What we're trying to do is expand our operation large enough to put all of the corn through our cattle. Right now, we run a farm stand. We market directly to various restaurants, and there's my 16-year-old son I was just describing, and that's on a Friday night. That's his idea of a Friday night, is working on the farm. That's some of the cattle that are getting close to being finished. Angus cattle, and you can see they got pretty good weight on them. But predominantly, we market through Black River Produce as our intermediary, and that's worked well for us because that gives us the volume to really make it work. Because you got to have a certain scale. You either got to be small enough or have the scale. I work off the farm. We're a first-generation farm, so to speak, even though I grew up on a very large farm in the Midwest. We started from scratch, and we've put everything we have into this farm. I always like to joke, my stock has 4 legs. And you're looking at, one theme that's kind of come across that's been interesting from the speakers before me is capital. It takes tremendous capital. If you look at the cattle on that picture in the bottom right, you're probably looking at 125 animals. Well, it takes me $100,000 just to acquire those animals, and that's not all of them. That's just part of the barn. And it's a big barrier that we're all faced with. You heard discussion and slides by earlier farm speakers about land, and that's a reoccurring theme. I call it the Walmart of America. We've all seen what Walmarts have done to our storefronts and downtowns, and the same thing's happening in the ag community. It's in the greater Northeast New York, it's the mega dairies that are like the Walmarts, and nothing against them. It's just destroying the fabric, and is the antithesis of local food. Whereas, we're fortunate to have an intermediary that we can market through in Black River, which is fabulous to work with. I like working with the intermediary, even though we do a lot of direct sales as well. The intermediary is so critical because, the first thing it starts with is the product. You got to have a vision of what you're going to produce. You got to have a belief in yourself. And our belief is what you're looking at here, these beautiful finished steers of a high quality animal. And so it starts with that quality product. But once you have that quality product, it's all about marketing. Because if you can't market it, it doesn't matter how good a product you have. You have to get that product out there. And the fact of the matter is, there's only so much you can do. You can't be an expert at marketing and an expert at finishing cattle and raise the capital and manage. There's only so many things you can do well. So my preference is to deal on a large scale with the intermediary. Our farm stand gives us an outlet to allow us, we move cattle through there as part of our identity in the community, even though it only constitutes about 3% of our sales. It's the most visible part of our sales. We work with restaurants. We've also had experiences with schools, and that has been mixed in as well because it's hard to get the consistent marketing. When you have a pen full of steers, as you saw in that picture, they got to go. Those cattle got to be out the door in 3 months, and that you can't just ebb and flow with that. They got to go when they're ready. So for me, working with institutions, that's, if you got the right situation, you can plan for it. If you got a college or a hospital that's taking a consistent large volume, but they got to take everything you've got. And you know, we at times will run out of steaks, other times we'll run out of hamburger, and are fretting to get all the cattle, you know, out and to meet those demands. So the working with the intermediary, to me, is the best long-term solution for farms trying to produce quality food locally. You know, we've been fortunate to have such a good intermediary that appreciates working with a local farm, and so that allows us not to worry about the marketing, and that allows them to to market a large amount of cattle. So it's working well for us, and that's the direction we want to stay. We like the institutional sales if we can keep it consistent. But the intermediary, that volume has worked well. I think it's great what Fine is doing because it's helping develop an appreciation and of local produce, keeping farming viable in New England. And I think what's one of the biggest challenges as we look at what Fine's doing is and the farm to the table, so to speak. I like to say from my pasture to your plate. Is educating people and the resources. There's a lot of folks that want to produce stuff, and if they have the right resources and education as to reach these outlets and these markets, I think that would be huge, and I think it would help these institutions if they had ways to. I think there's a lot of interest by institutions to have local healthy food. Because we grow a product that there's no hormones, no antibiotics, no nasties, as I like to say. And once people understand why our product's better, you know, you get meat from a feedlot, and it's full of hormones. People have no idea the amount of hormones they give. They fill them up with hormones to get them to grow faster and quicker and all that good stuff. Hormone treatments to keep them alive at the end because their livers will shut down because of all the hormones they've been giving them. And when people start to understand what a natural product is and what a healthy product is, they start to appreciate what we're paying. You know, why they have to pay that extra money, why it costs more for me to grow an animal on our farm, because we're using natural methods. And that appreciation, once institutions understand that, they are willing to pay more and willing to work local if they have the connections and the resources. And I think that's what it's all comes back to, is networking and education. So I think that is really helps. What Fine is doing is help make those connections.
Thank you, Arend. And thank you to all three of the producers who joined us today. We were ambitious in having 3 producers, and we don't have much time left for questions and answers. I want to invite everyone to put questions into the Q&A box, and we can try to answer maybe 1 or 2 on the phone here. Otherwise, if there are questions that are typed into the Q&A box but not answered, we will put a link to a document with all questions and answers into a follow-up email that we'll send, that will also include a link to the recorded webinar. So there were a couple of questions earlier that are answered in the text box, and everybody should have access to those. If anyone else has a question right now, if you want to type it in or indicate in some other way what it is.
And I'll just chime in here. This is Peter. Again, thanking all the farmers, and to Sarah's point about getting input from farmers and your perspectives more frequently is certainly something we're taking to heart in our planning more webinars during the coming year, and we'll clearly have an intention of including more producers in those. Sarah is really inspired by your comments about the need for more authentic connections from the institutions in terms of what their real demand is and what opportunities exist, and that the relationships with other producers and those institutions really help make that viable. And Carole, your comment about starting with the chefs as the people who are going to work with the local food and the issues there is really critical. And then hearing about your different histories and your different supply chains. Arend, your point about the value of working with an intermediary. Carole, you working more direct, and Sarah, you working with a combination was really valuable. We're hearing some great comments in the chat here about people's appreciation. As Nessa said, we'll take any questions that come in and put those in a follow-up document. The last thing I just wanted to see is if any of the producers had any questions for each other. Really might be able to just take one if there's anything that occurred to you. That was a trick question. I didn't set you guys up for that.
Well, you caught me off guard on that.
Yeah, I think Caitlin, if you can forward to the Stay in Touch slide, we can thank all the people who participated today and provide direct emails to Peter and myself. If you have any other questions or you want to dive deeper into this information after the webinar and after you take a look at the report, please feel free to reach out via our direct emails, and we will work with you. Our survey instruments and clean data sets with everything personal removed are available online. If you're from a different area and you're interested in running a survey like this, those survey instruments are available to you. We try to be very transparent in all of this work. So thanks again for joining us today.